Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from Metalla, Royalty, and Streaming, chatting with the CEO, Brett Heath. Brett and I are going to be recapping the company's Q3 financial results, which announced a bunch of records: record revenue, record cash flow, record adjusted EBITDA, and the first quarter ever of positive net income. We'll also go through a broad asset update focused on some of the larger paying royalties and some of those royalties that are within the portfolio of assets that are advancing closer to production. Metalla is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol MTA and on the NYSE under that same symbol MTA. Brett, let's just start off. Q3 financials released November 12th, late last week. Again, a lot of records here. A lot of that driven by the higher gold price. We all know the gold price kept rising in Q3, but there is also a noteworthy increase in the gold equivalent ounces that were delivered to the company. Let's start with those gold equivalent ounces because to me that shows real growth within your portfolio because those are the ounces that you are getting from your royalties. In the 3 months ended September 30th, you had 1,155 gold equivalent ounces delivered. Talk to us about the growth that you're seeing just on this front quarter over quarter, please.
Thanks, Corey. So we're seeing some great growth really from the beginning of this year, and a lot of that was being driven by Tocantinzinho, which started producing towards the end of last year. Also, Guitarra that started really producing towards the end of last year, and both of those operations have been ramping up very well here in 2025. We've seen our gold equivalent production from Q1 go from 628 to Q2, 840 to Q3, 1155. A big contribution from the records that we saw kind of across the board in operating and financial our operating cash flow and revenue and EBITDA and so forth was driven by our first payment from Endeavor. So this is another new mine that is just starting kind of production here in Q3, and we're glad to see that one start up, and we're expecting that one to kind of materially increase through the first half of 2026.
So, Brett, that's a big step change to have your first quarter of positive net income. Let's look ahead, though. What can we forecast for, let's say, Q4 and into next year? You still expecting to be positive net income?
Yeah, I think so. I think on an annualized basis in 2026, like we should be well into positive net income with Endeavor. The expectation that Endeavor is going to be kind of at a reasonable run rate kind of by Q1 of next year. And all the other operations are doing very well. Wharf has been kicking into gear. We've seen a very significant increase in the mine life on that one. Also, our expectation is that given the additional reserves and resources that were updated in the last resource update, we think a lot of that will find its way into the mine plan at today's gold price as well. So we see a very long life for Wharf. Tocantinzinho is also kind of just doing their initial exploration program on that land package. So we're also expecting some good results from that endeavor, and really just across the board on all these assets. It's just great to see all of them starting to hit stride. We've got significant mine lives ahead of all of them, and just solid cornerstone operations here that continue to kind of compound on each other as more assets come in production.
The one other news release I want to quickly cover before we dive more into some of these asset updates is the November 3rd news release where you increase the royalty on the Côté-Gosselin asset, now up to 1.5%. You increased your royalty by 0.15%. Talk to us about this transaction. Why increase that royalty? Why now?
Yeah, so this asset, we qualify this as our material asset. We think this asset is going to be kind of our cornerstone company making asset over the long term. What we see at Gosselin is, one of the best gold assets that we see in one of the best ones, at least in all of North America. It's gone from 0 to 7.4 million ounces. We expect that asset, Gosselin, to have a pretty material increase in reserves and resources come probably the end of Q2 2026. So there's been over 100,000 meters. In fact, IAMGOLD just reported in their Q3 that they have actually expanded the Gosselin drill program even further. And so we're expecting a pretty material increase in that. We think that it has potential to kind of be upwards of 10 million ounces on just Gosselin alone, and our royalty covers all of that. So we're excited to see that. Bringing in this royalty was the last piece of that royalty. So now we have fully consolidated the balance of that royalty that existed on this property package. And so now we hold that entire 1.5%. And we're also very excited about the integration of Gosselin, which is supposed to happen at the end of 2026. So that also is going to be a very significant catalyst, we feel, for the company.
Right, yeah, that's a big move because you hold a royalty on the portion of the Côté gold mine, but all of the Gosselin project. So, forecasting out revenue-wise, or when you could be receiving some gold equivalent ounces, what does that date look like for this royalty?
Yeah, so I mean, look, the Côté part of the royalty will start to kick off cash for us as IAMGOLD gets into kind of the second phase of the Côté pit. So they started mining Côté kind of towards the south, and as they transition, they're going to start mining the north side of the pit. That'll probably be in early 2027, potentially late 26, but probably early 27. And the big part, though, is really looking at kind of how Gosselin is integrated. We have expectations that the way that they are kind of likely thinking about it today is that they can expand the Côté pit up into the permit boundary. So this means that they can expand the Côté pit without having to go through the permitting process because they already have, or the ability to have, an expanded pit. Now, when they expand that pit towards Gosselin to the northeast, that is going to capture most likely some of our royalty. We don't know kind of how much, and obviously we need to wait to see kind of what the timeline is and kind of how that is going to be staged in. But it's exciting to see. It's exciting to see IAMGOLD talk about this super pit scenario, which is kind of what we envisioned all along. It's becoming a much, much bigger reality. And ultimately, we see this asset being significantly larger. You've got IAMGOLD out there already kind of talking about 55,000 tons per day. Currently, it's running at 36,000 tons, and it's producing kind of just under 500,000 ounces. So there's a lot of growth here in this asset. And as they start to look as in this super pit scenario, having that 1.5% that covers not only Gosselin, but really everything in between Côté and Gosselin that they'll be looking to expand into. We think it's going to be a very, significant asset for the company going forward.
All right, Brett, let's now move into more of the specific asset updates I'm going to start with the assets that are paying you the most. Tocantinzinho, you already mentioned, you went through a bit of an overview there, but Tocantinzinho, just in the 3 months ended September, contributed 361 gold equivalent ounces. That's a little over 30% of your overall gold equivalent ounces. It's growing, and it sounds like it's even going to continue to grow. So give us the outline of what we can look for in terms of this asset into next year, the growth there, please.
Yeah, so it's really a great asset for us. G Mining has been ramping that up. I feel like that asset now is running very, very well, and it's starting to kick off a lot of cash. And so now that they have that asset up and running, they're going to be looking to continue to kind of push that at optimal levels. And according to the mine plan, 2026 will be one of their bigger years. So we have that to look forward to. And, we think a little bit of success from the drill bit, we're likely going to see that mine life and reserve significantly increase as well. So very excited about that asset and really the duration exposure that we have to that and that operator.
Let's move on to Wharf Mine then, because that is the second largest contributor here. I understand the guidance has also been increased at the Wharf Mine. Talk to us about where guidance was, or what this mine was producing, and what that growth looks like.
So this mine is, I think it's pretty close to at least a record year in the recent time frame for core. They just revised full year guidance from 93 to 103,000 ounces of gold on this asset, and it's performing very well. So this will be probably one of our bigger years. But really, the exciting part of this asset is the significant increase in resources that this operation just had. When we bought this royalty about 6 years ago, it had about a 6 year mine life when we bought it. And currently today, it has upwards of a 10-year mine life. And we think that that probably will be going to 15 plus in the near future. So it's going to be a great asset for us kind of continuing on here for some time.
Okay, one other asset I really want to focus on is this Endeavor mine because look, this is the first quarter that the Endeavor mine paid anything to the company and it contributed 233 gold equivalent ounces. That's a large, really start for an asset to be paying here. The company did have to shut down some operations temporarily. So talk to us about what we can expect just in Q4 then, please.
Yeah, so this is a 4% royalty we have on this asset. So it can be very, very significant for us, or we expect it to be very, very significant for us when they ramp up. They were kind of slowly ramping up operations in Q3. And even kind of as part of the ramp up, that still was able to kick off kind of, as you noted, 233 GEOs. So even just then, a significant producer for our company. They did have a safety incident, unfortunately, that they had to deal with in Q4. So that did pause temporarily operations for about 4 to 6 weeks is kind of the expectation around the delay on that asset. So that will impact kind of what Q4 looks like from Endeavor. But operations, I believe, are have started or expected to start as of basically kind of today from a mining perspective. So this asset will likely continue to scale up. Now, as they get into the upper north lode, this is where they have all of the high grade silver. So that's really going to kind of get this asset moving in a really strong way. Revenues are going to kick up, GEOs are going to kick up when they get into that zone. The expectation is that they're going to be starting to pull ore from the upper north lode here, probably kind of in the second half of December into January is kind of the target for when they get into that. So we're really excited to see that. And then beyond that, they potentially have made a new discovery, surprisingly, under the parking lot, like less than 100 meters away from the existing development. And we think that has potential to really change this operation completely. So we're very, very excited to see what those results are. We think that they'll probably be out here shortly. By the looks of it today, it looks like it's pretty promising.
Okay, one other asset that we should cover too, another one of the larger paying assets, the Razino royalty. I believe this asset, at least production decreased a little bit over the second quarter of Q2 of this year. What can you tell us about what's going on with this asset and any growth that could be on tap here?
Yeah, so Aranzazu has been a very steady operation for us. We don't expect it to get significantly kind of larger than what it is today, but they have been expanding the mine life. They are having success from an exploration perspective. So it's a great steady asset. And in last quarter, it kicked off about 183 GEOs. It's usually between like 180 and 200 GEOs a quarter. So again, great asset at today's metal prices, and we're happy to have it.
One other note that you make on the La Guitarra asset, this is one of the smaller ones, contributed just 33 gold equivalent ounces in the 3 month ended, and the 9 month ended about 92 gold equivalent ounces. You note that expansion plans are underway to increase processing capacity by Q3 2027. What is the increase in processing capacity that company or that asset is looking for?
So currently they're doing about 500 tons per day, and they expect to get it up to about 1,500 tons per day by the end of 2027. So that's about triple the production. They also are running a big exploration program currently. Historically, this asset has had a lot of success when capital has been spent on exploration. So we're also very, very excited to see kind of what that brings here. But yeah, we're expecting this operation to, basically triple in production. So what is kind of relatively small and insignificant today, over the next couple of years will be kind of much more meaningful to the business, and we think it's got a bright future ahead as well.
Let's talk about some other assets then that are not paying. I'll throw it over broadly to you here, Brett. What are some of the ones that you're most excited about that seem to be developing, seem to be moving in the right direction, but right now are not in production, so they're not contributing to your revenues?
So two front and center. One is our royalty on Copper World. So Hudbay just received or announced a joint venture partnership with Mitsubishi Corporation, which included a $600 million strategic investment for a 30% interest in the joint venture in Copper World. And basically what that does is that allows the company Hudbay to basically almost be fully financed to build this asset. We're expecting a feasibility study, definitive feasibility study out probably in mid 2026. And then we're expecting most likely a construction or a final investment decision on this asset towards the end of 2026. And why this is so important is because this asset, these big copper assets, this one is in Arizona, they go on forever. This asset currently sits at about a 44-year reserve life. So once these assets go in production, historically, they produce well beyond the reserve. So having a portfolio of these big copper assets that really underpin the growth and kind of the steady production cash flow for decades and decades and decades through the cycles is very important. They're very difficult things to get in the royalty business, and we're happy to have a handful of these in our portfolio. Also, Taca Taca is another one that is in the near term. We're expecting some really good news on that probably within the next 6 months or so, as they apply for that project to be put through the RIGI program in Argentina, which will kind of start the clock on development as well. So that's another one with a 30+ year reserve life that we think is kind of looking to move forward here in the near future. And then Castle Mountain. Castle Mountain is going to be one of our largest producing assets. This asset, which is being developed by Equinox Gold, it's kind of their number one development asset at this stage. They've been able to delever a lot quicker than they originally anticipated, with the gold price sitting where it was today after the purchase of the balance of Greenstone. And now they're really focused on getting Castle Mountain going. It was accepted into the Fast 41 program, so this is a federal permitting process. So it's most likely to get fully permitted prior to the end of 2026. And I think that given that this was a past producing mine, they will be able to kind of, as soon as it's permitted, move that right into development and construction of phase two. Once this asset's in production, it should be doing, we haven't seen the updated mine plan, but our guess is that it'll probably have a profile of somewhere between 200, 250,000 ounces of gold a year. So this will be a top 10 mine in the United States. We have a 5% royalty that covers approximately 2 million of the, call it 7 million ounces on this project. And a large part of it, we believe will likely be at the beginning of the mine plan. So this will be a very significant asset. Probably on its own will kick off on average over the life of the asset around 5,000 gold equivalent ounces by itself. And you can kind of compare that to, the midpoint of our guidance this year, which was 4,000, with all 7 assets that are producing. So we've got some very significant assets that are on the horizon, making very material advances towards production, from permits being attained to fully financing these assets and so forth. So we're really excited to see, and we think that kind of within the next 12 months we're going to have very clear start dates on probably both of these, which I think will really allow the market to kind of fully value these assets in our portfolio.
So, Brett, obviously, it's very encouraging to see these assets continue to move forward, and then even some of the new assets come online to contribute on the revenue front. Got to ask you though, on the M&A front, something corporately that I'm sure you're always looking at is what other royalties can you add to the portfolio? What royalties can you increase? Kind of like what you did with that Côté-Gosselin royalty. Give us a lay of the land. What do you see coming in terms of M&A, bringing in more royalties into the company's portfolio?
So we've got a very full pipeline right now, looking at a number of different opportunities. The expectation from our position, given that we have so much growth already bought and paid for, we're you know leveraging that growth to be able to be disciplined on how we allocate capital going forward. But we also have a credit facility that currently stands at approximately 75 million US. We've got ample firepower. The each quarter, we should be moving closer, probably potentially even in Q4, to a net cash position. We're basically almost there right now. So we've got ample firepower for engaging in a new transaction, and we'll have to see kind of what comes of that, but there are some good opportunities out there.
All right, Brett, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you very much for going through those financials and those asset updates. It's always a lot to take in because there are a lot of assets within the company. And now that you're, in a way, kind of turning the corner with net income and going to a net cash position, hopefully we will see some more acquisitions and some more adding to the portfolio, as well as that continued growth on the financial side. For all of you listening, if you have any follow-up questions for Brett, please email me. I will get him to address those, and I will follow up as any other major news is released out of the company. So, Brett, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the update.
Thanks, Corey.